When making adaptation policy and practice recommendations that affect farmers, intermediaries and decision makers in governments, NGOs, and the private sector use externally provided weather and climate information. In semi-arid regions like sub-Saharan Africa and India, this information helps farmers to manage the risks they face by guiding their choices of which crops to grow, when to plant them, what seeds to use, how to market their produce, and how to divide their resources between farming and other livelihoods. Climate information sits on a continuum of decision-making time horizons, from days to weeks, to seasons to years, and on to decades. On this time scale, short-term climate information focuses on days to weeks, while long-term information relates to planning decisions for years to decades. Seasonal forecasts sit somewhere in the middle. In our review across Africa and India, we found that short-term climate information, like daily weather advisories, are used most commonly and most successfully. For example, to help people decide when to irrigate their crops. There was some evidence that seasonal forecasts are used for decision-making by governments and NGOs, but little indication of them being used by farmers. It was more difficult to find examples of people using long-term climate information. This was mainly because this information currently tends to be highly uncertain. The scale of long-term climate projections tends to be too coarse. Policymakers find it difficult to justify investment and action based on impacts that might occur far into the future. And finally, there is typically a lack of institutional capacity to deal with long-term climate risks. However, in our new paper, we argue that efforts to adapt to climate variability and climate change can be strengthened by considering how weather and climate information is used at different scales of time and place, by different people, and towards different outcomes. We believe that short-term coping actions taken by farmers can have cascading and incremental benefits for longer-term adaptation, and in time maybe even transformative change. Ideally, these decisions and actions can, and perhaps should, be influenced by knowledge of both short-term and long-term consequences. We developed a framework that captures this idea and that identifies 3 main flows that determine how climate information shapes adaptation behavior. First, there are incremental behavioral shifts. Here, short-term climate information helps farmers plan for and manage short-term risks. For example, in Western Kenya, at the start of each rainfall season, seasonal forecast information is jointly produced by the Kenya Meteorological Services, sector experts, and indigenous knowledge forecasters to help communities plan for and reduce their risks to rainfall extremes. Long-term climate information that speaks to longer-term adaptive behavior can also impact decisions in the short term. For example, climate projections that demonstrate a warming trend can motivate people to start growing temperature-tolerant crop varieties. However, we found far fewer examples of this. The second flow concerns systemic restructuring. Here, medium to long-term investment in institutions and infrastructure contributes to restructuring the entire system of producers, communicators, and users of climate information. For example, in India, national investments in the mid-2000s helped develop a robust system of climate information services that includes the production of forecasts, training of extension staff, and field demonstrations through regional agriculture universities. These investments slowly fostered recognition of the utility of climate information to manage risk. And today, the benefits of this are visible through farmer-led demands for better forecasts, the private sector seeing value in investing in climate information delivery, and integration of climate information in national adaptation initiatives. The third flow depicts event-driven sudden change. In this case, high-impact extreme events can motivate swift action to set up infrastructure, increase investment, and build capacity. Even though these activities are done on a short time horizon, once in place, they can lead to long-term transformative change. For example, in India, the super cyclone in Odisha in 1999 led to early warning systems being extensively institutionalized and inspired a deep perceptual and behavioral change among government staff, civil society, and exposed communities. Our framework shows how short-term and long-term weather and climate information can be integrated across spatial scales in a manner where current successes in using short-term information can be leveraged to build incremental processes for using long-term information. To support this process, there is an onus on climate information providers to develop tailored services that span timescales and help address different needs. This requires a concerted, collaborative effort between local, national, regional, and international institutions with appropriate funding support to develop forecast systems, maintain and strengthen observation networks, and engage with different communities to allow relevant information to be co-developed.